Namaste everyone. My name is Vaishali Shah. I welcome you to our session on hinduscriptures.com Facebook page. Today we have Mr. Chandru with us, who is going to talk about very interesting topic about Mahabharata. So before we start the session, I request Mr. Chandru to do a small prayer.
Okay, thank you for introducing me. And so I would pray at this point of time. I would like to pray to my Guru for giving me this knowledge. So with a small prayer, Om Adhyana Timirantasya Gyananjana Shalakya Chukshurun Vitamena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. So with this small prayer, we will pray to the Guru that he shows us the knowledge, because we are downtrodden and we do not have the proper vision and knowledge, but the spiritual master shows us the way. So with this small prayer, we start today's session.
So now I would like to read his profile. Mr. Chandru Ramesh is BECAC is a formal software engineer from HCL Technologies. He gave up his well-paying job to research the history of India. He has authored a groundbreaking and best-selling research book, Mahabharata, Myth or History. This book established that Krishna is not an imaginary or mythical personality, but an actual person who appeared in the past. He uses an interdisciplinary approach to justify the historical evidence of Krishna. In this book, he presents more than 300 pieces of evidence backed by 1,000 plus citations to justify his claims. He travels across India and to countries abroad to present his research work. He is a great speaker in several temples, communities, and institutions. His courses on history are famous for simplifying the understanding of history. He is currently engaged in important research projects in history and archaeology to establish the real history of India. So, Mr. Chandru, I'm very glad that we spoke and finally we are here. Tell us something about your past. How did you start and how did you land here? Where are you from?
So basically, I am a Sindhi. Sindhis are hardcore businessmen and they love to earn a lot of money and like that. So I am a Sindhi by family background. So our ancestral region is near Karachi, which unfortunately went to this uh, country called Pakistan. So my grandparents from both sides had to save their lives and come rushing to India because they found this place to shelter them. And so I heard stories from my grandfather that both sides of houses, to the right and to the left of the houses which they stayed, were all burned. Women were attacked and everybody was killed, but luckily they survived and they got the fastest possible access to the railway station, and then they got the train and then they landed near Mumbai. Then you all must be knowing that there is a place in near Mumbai which is called as Ulhasnagar, right? So that is famous to be the Sindhi area in India.
Sindhi, yeah, colony, yeah.
Yeah, so most of my relatives they are there in that region, but I was born in South India, born and raised in South India. So you could call me as an adopted South Indian, because I connect myself more to my food habits, my behavioral patterns, my speeches are more like a South Indian because I was born and raised there. So my homeland has become South Indian. So I'm currently from South India, but right now I'm more in North India, researching on the historical and the archaeological sites here, writing more books and so on. So that's what I do right now. Formerly, I was a software engineer, and I had this grace within me to work on the history of India. So that's me in very crisp, very short.
Very interesting, because yes, your appearance is more like South India, even your name. I did not expect this story to come out of you. Yeah. So, what is your educational background? What did you study? And
I studied computer science and engineering. I was a software engineer in HCL Tech, and we worked for a pharma company. I mean, my project was our clients were a pharma company, and we were supposed to produce work on databases for clinical trials. Like when a new drug is produced, so we have to work on that. So that was my area of working when I was working as a software engineer. So that's about my educational and my work experience.
so tell us the beginning of this journey, because I'm very intrigued now to understand that how you must have started.
Yeah, so I had this query within me. I was deeply attracted by Indian spirituality, right? So I used to go through multiple organizations and try to read different Upanishads, Veda, Bhagavad Gita, and so on. So I was very much intrigued by the philosophy and the culture of ancient India, right? So I wanted to go deeper into it. So when I went deeper, I found the Bhagavad Gita to be the most intriguing and inspiring for me. And one question always remained, that is this historical or mythical? Because Bhagavad Gita is part of the Mahabharata, Bhishma Parva. So is Mahabharata itself historical or not? Is Krishna historical or not? Are the Pandavas historical or not? So this one thing has has greatly impacted me. I always wanted to go deeper into this question, whether it's history or myth, right? So, like for example, one instance which really impacted me a lot is when I was in a book fair in Chennai, in Tamil Nadu. So there was a debate raging on between in a book fair, right? One person was selling the Mahabharata, another person was buying the Mahabharata, or he came to see the books, and the stall person was giving the Mahabharata to him. And then he said, "Oh, why you're giving me this nonsense, this mythology, and all that." So it was a hot debate. I mean, everywhere, all around the that particular stall, people came and they were seeing that frenzy, that they were screaming at loud voices and so on. So the point was that one person is saying that it is history, another person is saying that it is all fables, fantasies, and mythology. So that was a very intriguing starting point where I knew that I had to, go deeper into it. So that's one instance, and another instance is when I went to Sri Lanka, I met a Buddhist monk. So he told me that the Mahabharata characters, which includes the Pandavas, which includes Krishna, they are mentioned in the Buddhist literature. And these Buddhist literatures go back to 2,400 years, so they are quite ancient. So we have this narrative which is often spread that, oh, anyway, Mahabharata is just 1,000 years old, Mahabharata is just 1,500 years old, and so on. But imagine if Mahabharata characters are being mentioned in the Buddhist literatures going back to 2,400 years ago, how old it must be, right? So these two were kind of the intriguing starting points where I decided that I need to work on this. I need to go deeper. I need to go and find out if really this happened or not. So that's the beginning of my journey.
That's very interesting. So, what are your findings? Now let's discuss your findings one after another.
Yeah.
First, we would like to start with Krishna. So, how many proofs, citations, how many places where you found them or found the mention of Krishna?
Yeah, if you see, there are more than, in my book, I have given more than 300 plus data points, more than 300. And these range from various academic disciplines, which includes epigraphy, which is the study of inscriptions. Then I have mentions from petroglyphs, which are cave paintings. Then we have evidences from ancient statues and Jaina literature, literature, Greek literatures, Chinese literatures, Vedas, Puranas, ancient Tamil literature, right? And then we have evidences of the Janapada, the various kingdoms which existed during the Mahabharata period. They are also historical. And the archaeological finds at Dwarka, Kurukshetra, Indraprastha, Mathura have also indicated that Mahabharata is not mythical, that all these sites are very ancient and going back to the Indus period, right? The Indus Valley period, or in other words, the Sindhu Saraswati period. So all this clearly shows that Mahabharata is a very, very ancient event happened in a very distant past, right? So that's one thing which I found, that there are evidences from various branches of knowledge. It's not just limited to only the literature, right? We have evidences in several branches. Anywhere you go and touch, you will find the impact and the evidences of the Mahabharata.
So, give me some examples of scriptures where you found that okay, Krishna is mentioned.
Yeah, one most interesting example is definitely from the Buddhist literature, where you find in a book named Ghata Jataka. Ghata Jataka is a very important Jataka because it contains the story of Krishna and his father Vasudeva Devata and his mother Devaki, and how they used to be tormented by Kamsa, right? All that story is mentioned in the Ghata Jataka. So here Krishna is called as Vasudeva, okay, and mother is called as Devagappa, which is a Pali. Kamsa is also mentioned, and so like that. We have several. It's not exactly the same story, but we find that the story is replicated and a little re-adapted according to the Buddhist philosophy. So, but the story is there, that Kamsa is the inimical character, Devaki and Vasudeva are the couples, and they have the son Krishna. He goes and then he comes back, and then again Dwarka is established. All that is there in the Ghata Jataka. So that one thing is a clear reference that the Mahabharata story or the Krishna story has not been created after the Buddhist period, right? So it has to be much before, because there we find as a reference in the Buddhist literature.
So, what are your findings about Mahabharata? Say about what about the timeline? Let's start with that. Like, what do you
Yeah.
think when it must have occurred?
You see, there are different perspectives about when the Mahabharata happened. One perspective is that the Mahabharata happened around 3,000 years back. Okay, there is one perspective which says the Mahabharata happened 3,000 years back. The famous one is Dr. B.B. Lal. So what B.B. Lal did is, he's an archaeologist. So he researched in the various areas related to Mahabharata. So he gave the dates that the Mahabharata happened 3,000 years back. So this is one date, and then you have the datings of the river Saraswati drying up. So based on that, we have the Sanoli chariots, right? And some scholars propose that based on the Sanoli chariots, the dating of Mahabharata is around 4,000 years back. And then there is the astronomical dating of the Mahabharata. Right, so that based on that date of Mahabharata. But the most solid dating of the Mahabharata is definitely through the inscriptions. Right, the inscriptions give a clear date that the Mahabharata happened around 5,000 years back. To be precise, the inscriptions give a date of 3101 BCE. It's approximately 5,124 years ago. So this is the date given by the inscriptions. The inscriptions say that the Mahabharata happened these many years ago. Now, the point is that we do not have archaeological data yet, right, to completely substantiate it, because as you know, in India, archaeological research is still not comprehensively done. There are more than 90%, according to American archaeologists. So American archaeologists have this belief that India is still, majority of India, ancient India is still not excavated. So considering that fact, right, we definitely can give a weightage to the traditional date of the Mahabharata, which is 3101 BCE. So my proposal for the date of Mahabharata was 3101 BCE.
Which is almost close to all our other traditional researchers are saying, isn't it?
Yeah, the traditional dating of Mahabharata is clearly 3101 BCE, right? So that is the date when it is suggested as the year when Mahabharata war happened.
Okay, and how about other characters of Mahabharata? What do you think? What about them? What did you find about them?
You see, the other characters of Mahabharata, for example, if you take, there is this these Pandavas. The Pandavas are very prominently mentioned in several literatures, in Buddhist literatures, Then we have it in the Tamil Sangam literatures. Then we have the Pandavas being mentioned in inscriptions, right? So they are prominently mentioned. And the Mahabharata character of Dhritarashtra is mentioned in the Veda. We have in the Kataka Samhita of the Yajurveda, we have mention of Dhritarashtra as the son of Vichitravidya. He is mentioned in the Yajurveda. So we have mentions of, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So we have mentions of the Mahabharata characters like Shantanu Devapi. Shantanu, we all know about Shantanu, he's the ancestor of the Pandavas and the Kauravas. So Shantanu is mentioned in the Rig Veda, and Shantanu and Devapi are mentioned in the Rig Veda, and they are also characters in the Mahabharata. They are the predecessors of the Mahabharata characters like Pandavas and Kauravas. So Shantanu and Devapi are mentioned in the Rig Veda. We have mention of Dhritarashtra in the Kataka Samhita of Yajurveda. We have mention of Akrur, right? Who is a relative, who is a Yadav and also relative of Krishna. He is mentioned in the Nirukta, which is the etymological dictionary of the Vedic corpus. So we have mention of the Mahabharata characters throughout in Vedic corpus literatures as well.
So what have you covered in your book? Because you have given this very interesting title and the book is also doing extremely well. Give us some idea what have you covered in your book?
What I've done is that I went through multiple disciplines, be it the Veda, be it the Puranas, be it the inscriptions, be it coins. So I went to every single branch and I went really deeper into it, right? And I went deeper into it, and then I tried to find if there is evidences of Krishna, Mahabharata in these respective areas. So what I found is that in every sphere there is evidences of Mahabharata and Krishna in every sphere. Like if you see in the inscription, there are several inscriptions which refer to Krishna, which contain inscriptions which refer to the Yadavas. There are several inscriptions which refer to the 5 Vrishnis. Actually, one inscription for 5 Vrishnis from Vrindavan in a place called Moravel inscription it is called. So these five Vrishni heroes are actually Vasudeva, Krishna, Balram, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and Samba. So then we have panels found in sculptural panels we find in Andhra Pradesh, in a place called Kondamattu in Guntur district. These 5 heroes are carved in sculptures, and these 5 heroes are mentioned in literature in Vayu Puran. So then we find that literature is getting corroborated by inscription being corroborated by sculptures. So it's a triangular corroboration which is happening there. So that way we can see that these are actual historical characters, the Yadavas, Krishna, Vasudeva, right? And then Balram, and right. So that way I could find that it is getting connected and proven from multiple angles, right? So the Yadavas were historical, the Kauravas were historical, because in the even again coming back to the Buddhist literature, there are mention about the Kurus, right? The place of Indraprastha is being mentioned, and the Kurus were ruling in Indraprastha, that is being mentioned, right? The Pandavas, the 5 Pandavas are mentioned in the Kunala Jataka, book named Kunala Jataka. So in that way, we find that this is mentioned throughout history. I mean, throughout history, going back to thousands of years, the Pandavas or the Mahabharata war, or Dhritarashtra, or you may take even Krishna, they are mentioned throughout in literature, in inscriptions, and so on. So my proposition is when you have an event or the characters of the event being so vividly mentioned for thousands of years across multiple spheres of knowledge, multiple disciplines, how this can be mythical? It's not a mythology. It's actually happened in the past. That's why it should be considered as the history of India. So Mahabharata should not be treated as a mythological narration. It should be treated as the history of greater Bharat.
I totally agree with you, because I always wonder that why should we call as mythology? I mean, there is absolutely no content or the scripture which can be called, mythological scripture, especially in India. And I think we are the only country which has such a huge and vast knowledge about ourselves and the way we have recorded over the period of thousands of years. We should be the last country, who would should be considered as mythological or a fake or not clear. And another question I have is why the Western world depends highly on um archaeological evidence? Because what about the knowledge which are there with people saved in Gurukul? And what about the knowledge which we have in the form of Tadpatri, yeah, in the form of, a different kind of leaves, or the inscriptions on the walls or on the rocks or in the temple? So we have many such areas which would prove our theories very clearly, right? So why not to put forward those things to the world, and rather than just waiting for only the archaeological excavation? Because
Yeah,
I think
I'll give a
that would be
perspective of that.
misleading. Yeah. What do you
Yeah,
think about it?
I'll just give a quick perspective of that. Why archaeological evidence is given more prominence is because the Western way of seeing things is through pratyaksha. Like if you know, there are different pramanas, different ways of gaining knowledge. Their knowledge system is primarily pratyaksha. If I see it, I believe it, right? If I don't see it, I don't believe it. As simple as that. So when some tradition is coming for thousands of years, for them it doesn't hold much value because for them it thinks, "Arey, ye Shabda Praman kya hota hai? What is Shabda Praman anyway? How do I accept it as authentic source of knowledge, or how do I accept that I can accept it as factual?" So Shabda Praman is not taken seriously by the West, right? Because there's way of seeing things is very much different from the way Indians used to see, Bharatiyas used to see. So when you consider from that angle, archaeology will always be given higher prominence by the West, undoubtedly. So yes, archaeology, more than archaeology, it's more important, like literature, inscriptions, and all that, which you rightly pointed out, is definitely important. But the West will ultimately be convinced when a sufficient archaeological exploration is done. Now, I'll tell you why literature is more important than archaeology. Many times people wonder that they think that archaeology is more important than literature. I disagree. I would say literature is more important than archaeology. There is a famous example of the city of Troy. There was a city called Troy, which is vividly mentioned in Greek literatures. Now, many times people consider that the city of Troy is mythological, right? The Western scholars all consider that the city of Troy is mythological. But then recently, the last century, they found the city of Troy. And once they found the city of Troy, they redefined their heroes. No, Troy must have, there is some substance of history in Greek literature. Then people started considering, oh, maybe we can consider Greek literature as having some substance in history. So the point here is that all these traditions which are being stored for thousands of years, this cannot be just, like fallacious and without any reason, without any background. They have a solid tradition backing them up, a solid tradition which is backing them up. And this is something which has happened. That's why there is so many references varying across multiple academic disciplines. So the point which I'm saying is, even if you don't have archaeology, why? Because it has impacted cultures for thousands of years. That's one thing. And even if you don't find archaeology now, you may definitely find it in future. Just like in the case of Troy, you may not find it now, but you may definitely find it in the future, right? So considering that, they did it in Dwarka, they researched in Dwarka and they found that there's a huge city underground. Of course, it's not fully done, not fully excavated, not fully researched. But consider the fact, just touching upon that area of Dwarka gave massive pressures came out during the Mediterranean archaeological research. So that's the potential India has to offer. That's the potential which this great country has to offer. But we have not done our sufficient explorations, and not having done explorations, and we are sitting on top of ancient cities. Many times, if you see, the Indraprastha is actually modern day Delhi. Now imagine, where will you excavate in Delhi, the city of Delhi? How is it possible? So we are sitting on top of ancient cities, or they're completely left unexplored, and they are, in forests have grown on something, or they have got submerged in water. So considering, and it's still not fully excavated. So I hope and urge that the government of India takes serious efforts to bring out all these archaeological sites, which either we are living on top of it, right, or they are completely unexplored, or they are inside the seas. So imagine if those cities come out, that could have a huge impact on the history narrative which is being currently set. So in conclusion, I would say even if you don't have archaeology, if you have literature which is substantiated by so many ways of so many arguments, and archaeology is still not excavated, we could still give evidence, we could still give credibility to literature. Whereas if you have only archaeology, like you go and excavate some place and you find a lot of artifacts, a lot of evidences you find, but you don't have literature, you don't know what it really means. So better to have literature, and archaeology is coming up gradually. That's much better rather than just having it and having no literature, right? So that's my conclusion.
Why we can't prove our uh, prominence in this knowledge? Because I mean, we have, though our scriptures were burned down in 12th century, 13th century, even after that, but we still have enough written material and their commentaries by various authors and acharyas in last say 1,000 years. So why not to bring forth their knowledge to the world? Okay, so what about the proof of, I actually want to know, can you give me some reference of Mahabharata and Vedas? Because usually people have this idea that Vedas were written before Mahabharata. So how come Vedas would have Mahabharata or their character
That's
mention in it, right?
yeah.
So give me some idea about this normal or very, very common notion people have.
Yes, that's actually a very common question, and I do get this question quite often, and I have addressed this in my book as well. In chapter 2 of my book and chapter 1 also, I given comprehensive explanations for this. Anyway, I'll explain it again for the benefit of the audience. That you see, there is a book called as Ashwalayana Griya Sutra. Okay, I'm just reading out from my book. Right, the Ashwalayana, there is Adhyaya 3, Kandika 4, and Sutra number 4. It reads, Sumantu Jaimini Vaishampayana Paila Sutras Bhashyas Bharat Mahabharat. Right, these are the various books which people used to read. Imagine Sumantu Jaimini, of course, these are the names of the authors. Then we have the Bharata and Mahabharata, which were read by people in the Vedic period. So what's happening right here is that we can see that there is a common period in which people of the Vedic period are aware of the Mahabharata, which are there, much before this period. And the Veda does not speak. Okay, the Griya Sutras, of course, could have been compiled a little later, but the Veda itself has a chronology touching upon all the way up till Dhritarashtra and also till Krishna. Devaki Putra Krishna is mentioned in the Chandogya Upanishad. So we have the Vedic chronology touching all the way up till Dhritarashtra and Krishna. It doesn't touch upon the Pandavas. It does not touch upon the post-Pandava or post-Kaurava period, right? Like Janamejaya or Parikshit and all that. So we don't find that the Veda is touching upon that chronology. But the Veda is definitely aware of Devaki, Shantanu, ancestors of the Pandavas and Kauravas. They definitely are aware of Dhritarashtra, right? And they're aware of Krishna. So we see that the Veda is touching upon all the way up to the Mahabharata period, but it does not speak of the Mahabharata war. Whereas the Mahabharata speaks of the Dhritarashtra, it speaks of Devaki, Shantanu, it speaks of Bhishma, Akrura, it speaks of post Mahabharata characters and so on. So what we find is that the Veda is coming up till the Mahabharata war period, but not exactly the Mahabharata war. It seems to be have compiled much before the Mahabharata war, but it is aware of Dhritarashtra, it is aware of Krishna and so on. And then we have the Mahabharata, which seems to be aware of the pre-Dhritarashtra characters. It is aware of Dhritarashtra, it is aware of the Pandava Kaurava, it is aware of characters after that as well. So there is a common period. So Veda is touching all the way up to this common period. Now that's the chronological background of it. Okay. So now the question is, why does the Veda does not refer to the Mahabharata war? That's one question which people often have. If it is historical, it must be mentioned in the Veda. How can we accept it otherwise? So the answer for this right? The answer for this is again the Ashwalayana Griha Sutra. So in the Griha Sutra of Ashwalayana, we have this mention which says that Itihasa Purana, right? The Itihasa are mentioned in the I'll just read it out. In that he recites the rikas, he thereby satisfies the yajur, the oblations of ghee, samans, and with oblations of honey, atharvan and angirasha hymns, oblations of soma, brahmana, kalpa, gatha, narasamsis, itihasas and puranas. So imagine that the Griha Sutras are aware of the itihasa, a text called as itihasa, and we know the itihasas are two. One of them is Mahabharata. So itihasa, the word itself means it does happen. So it's basically that they are seeing something and they are recording it and they're calling it as, they see it as it is. They're recording it as it is, right? So that's the background of the Itihasa. And the Vedas are aware of the Itihasas. I mean, the Griha Sutras, are, which are part of the Vedas, of course. So they are aware of the Itihasa. So why does the Mahabharata war not find its mention in Vedic Veda directly? So the answer to this is that it was not required to mention it or explain it or refer to it. But anyway, there is going to be a detailed book which is coming to be released anytime sooner. Like for example, if I have a very clear vision, Mahabharata war will happen, Mahabharata characters are there, I'm going to write a detailed book on that. So why I need to mention it in the Veda? There is no need to mention it in the Veda. So that's why, but at the same time, these are very important characters, be it Dhritarashtra, Shantanu, or Akrura, Devakiputra Krishna. They were very important characters. So the Veda did not miss them. I mean, so especially when you speak of Devapi Shantanu, or when you speak of Dhritarashtra, or when you speak of Devakiputra Krishna, these were very important them, right? But the Veda is also, the compilers of the Vedas know very well that anyway there is a future possibility that the entire thing will come out in the form of a mega book called as Mahabharata. So why do we need to write it in the way to come out in the form of a separate book? So the answer to this is to describe and tell all the events of the Mahabharata, because anyway it is going to come out in the form of a separate book, right? So that's the answer. But at the same time, when we find traces of Mahabharata characters, traces of the references to Mahabharata text, that the Vedic period, people of the Vedic period were aware of these characters and the book Mahabharata. It's not something which is created out of thin air. Like some people say, oh, Mahabharata was created just 1,000 years back or 2,000 years back. It's not like that. Because the Vedic period itself, we find the Mahabharata characters are being mentioned in the Vedic period itself. So Mahabharata characters are not, much far away from the Vedic period. They are very near to the Vedic period and just immediately after the Vedic period. So that's the chronology.
But why do you call it Vedic period? Because I think Vedic period name itself was given by the Western researchers just to give some, time, mention that some time era is Vedic era. Because for us, everything is Vedic era, even till maybe say Vikramaditya in Ujjain. Maybe that till then we can go up to Vedic era. Maybe after that, the way we deteriorated in terms of, lifestyle and all, maybe we cannot consider. But anyway, so what all research have you done? Where to arrive to this book? I'm sure you must have done a lot of research. Give some one or two examples of your research where you must have gone physically and then found some inscriptions or found some written proofs.
Yeah. So regarding the Vedic period question, I'd just like to add one point here. It's not that we as followers of Sanatan Dharma, we think that, Vedic period is just restricted to this point of time. But academically speaking, people expect these timelines to say, okay, Vedic period, Mahabharata. So when they are expecting these kind of timelines to be mentioned, that is the reason why we mention a Vedic period. But as you rightly pointed out, the Vedas are, impact of the Vedas are there for a really long period of time, and that is undoubtedly, there is no question about that, right? That's one point. And your next question was regarding the inscriptions. And inscriptions wise, you see, I have gone to places like Nagar, which is a very important place in terms of its historical impact. like people generally think that okay, I'll just give you a brief background of it. um, there was hypothesis, I would say, which was being spread by the British scholar. Krishna is a imaginary character created after Christ. Matlab, Christ is the original personality, and Krishna has been copied based on Christ, because Krishna, Christ names are similar, and Christ is also a shepherd. Krishna is a cowherd, right? He was taking care of cows. In some, Krishna started his the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. So in that way, he's a religious teacher, and Jesus Christ was one who is instrumental in creating Christianity. So in that way, there were parallels being drawn between Krishna and Christ, right? So this theory was being spread that Krishna is an imaginary character who did not exist in history, was created based on Christ. But how absurd and how nonsensical is this? Because there are references of Krishna in literature, in inscriptions, going back much before the period of Christ. And therefore, this inscription called as the base Nagar column or the Heliodorus pillar is extremely important. In the Heliodorus pillar, we find the most ancient reference to Vasudeva, right? So in that inscription is written that Vasudeva, the god of the gods, right? Like if I have to say it in Hindi, Devo ke Dev Vasudeva. That's the colloquial way of saying. So this inscription says that Vasudeva is the god of the gods. Right? I'll quickly read through the inscription of it. So in that inscription, this particular traveler from abroad, he's basically from Takshashila. He said that I'm from Takshashila, which is none other than Takshashila. So he says that I'm from Takshashila and I am a Bhagavat. I'm a Bhagavat. So Bhagavat means there is a Bhagavat book Bhagavata, which is the Bhagavad Puran, and there is a person Bhagavata, which means a devotee. So he calls himself as a Bhagavat, which means he's clearly calling himself as a devotee of Krishna or Vishnu. So he is coming from Takshashila, and he is coming on behalf of Antyalki Das. So in the inscription is written Antalikita, right? And he is going to meet Kashiputra Bhagabhadra, a king named Kashiputra Bhagabhadra, probably a prince, right? In the 14th ruling year, regular year. So in the 14th year of ruling. So in that 14th year of that king of Kashi, he's going to meet him. He's coming from Takshashila. Okay, he's coming from Takshashila, which is in modern day Pakistan. And from Takshashila, he's going to Kashi. On the way, he drops at Vidisha district in a place called as Besnagar. Now it's called as Besnagar. So there he is most likely that he has renovated an ancient temple of Krishna or Vishnu, most probably Krishna. So there he is renovating the temple of Krishna and he is constructing a pillar. And in that pillar, it is a Garuda Stamba. Because we know that we have the culture that there is a, in Tamil we call as Kodimaram. Kodimaram means there is the flag, right? Stamba. In that we have the flag of the deity who is being worshipped. Like if it is Shiva, there is a different type of flag. If it is Balramji, then there is a different type of flag. If it is Krishna or Vishnu, it is Garuda. So Garuda Stamba is being constructed, and in that Stamba, he is writing about himself, saying that I am a Bhagavat, I am coming from Takshashila, I am going to Kashi. So this particular inscription fascinated me a lot because this is the most ancient reference to Vasudeva. And why I think it is more of it's Krishna, because of the fact that during that period we also find inscriptions in Nanaghat. There is a place called Nanaghat, which is just in Maharashtra, quite nearby. So in Nanaghat we have Vasudeva and Balram being mentioned. Let me also give you the detail of that inscription. It's called as Nanaghat cave inscriptions. So in that we have references to Vasudeva and Samkarshana. Now, when Samkarshana comes, it's obviously Balramji. So when Balramji is coming, and when you say Vasudeva, it's clearly Vasudeva and Balram, the Krishna Balram. So 2,200-year-old inscription in Maharashtra is aware of Krishna and Balram in the form of Vasudeva and Samkarshana. So therefore, this particular inscription, which is in Madhya Pradesh, is definitely, which is just 50, 100 years or probably 100 years before this period, is definitely most likely to be Krishna and not Vishnu, because that period we find that there are inscriptions which are referring to Krishna as Vasudeva. And of course, Krishna has this name Vasudeva, and Krishna is actually the person who is more referred as Vasudev than Vishnu. Right. So in that way, I see that this is the most ancient and in one way a very fascinating inscription which refers to Vasudev Krishna.
So have you done any research on or have you done any research in Jain scriptures? Because there is some mention of Krishna in Jain scriptures as well. This is out of our question list, but I was just got curious.
Yeah, it is literally impossible to avoid Krishna. So even the Pandavas and Mahabharata. So we do find references of Krishna and Mahabharata characters in the Jain literatures, but of course the philosophical implications are quite different from Sanatana Dharma, which the practices of Sanatana Dharma might not agree with the conclusions given by the Jain sources about Mahabharata or about the philosophy and so on. But definitely one aspect which is most intriguing right now as a historian, as a historical researcher, what I find is that Krishna and Mahabharata were so important that they could not avoid it. They could not avoid it and start something from scratch, and start something from out of which has no relationship from the past, and then start spreading a new religion. It would not have worked so well unless you take Krishna and Mahabharata as part of the Jain pantheon and present it like that. So what I find is that yes, Jains have mentioned about Krishna and Mahabharata because they were very important during that period. Avoiding them or missing them would not have helped their cause during that period. So yes, they are mentioned in Jain sources.
The last important question I have is, how do you look at present scenario? How do we communicate with our youth about our glorious past? And it's not just past, it's a glorious past. Advanced technology was used in Mahabharata. People thinking and science was much ahead of today's time. How do we package and present it to the youth?
Yeah, so regarding youngsters, I definitely would like to invite the youngsters that why don't you consider a career in this field? Imagine that if you want to be an Egyptologist, which is a researcher of ancient Egypt, it's a very reputed thing to do, right? If you want to be an Indologist, right, Indian history researcher, is not that reputed among the youth today. They would like to go for UPSC or GATE exams and so on, but somehow this passion and craze for ancient India is still not there, academically speaking, among the youngsters. At least not as much as compared to other civilizations. I find this partly due to the colonial upbringing of the education system. I mean, the education system has been tuned in many ways, a very colonial way. So to break out of it and to think different, right? To think different, that chalo, we also can try this as well. That is not coming. And even if they try to do something different, they are scared or they're concerned ki, where will the finance come from? Who will give us salaries or so on. So there are many considerations which youngsters rightfully have. So it is something which we need to collectively work on, and it's depending a lot on the government. But see, governments also are a replication of what public thinks, right? Because like if a government is selected, is based on a public sentiment which is running at a particular point of time, right? So it is definitely possible that we as a public inspire a movement in which we decide, okay, now we are taking up a particular state and we are taking up a particular district, and we are going to excavate all the history which is possible in that region, whatever is possible. Not that we are going to, demolish whoever is sitting on ancient sites. Although we can request them to move out, and the government can pay for their movement, and that place can be excavated. That's definitely possible. But what I suggest is that there should be a mass movement in which we can at least start by districts. Okay, we take a district and we do thorough research, archaeology, history, culture, tradition, etc. We bring out a lot of books, a lot of videos, a lot of awareness. And then as the public movement grows, the entire India can be mapped and excavated. And if this is done, I assure you that the world is in for a complete surprise. right? And that can be done by the youth, and that starts with an initiative. That starts with one person having that vision, and then there are people, some people join, and then it expands, then district wise, then it could become state wise, then it could become region wise, and then it could become a national movement. So I, at this point of time, I'm inviting, if anybody is interested to work on the history of India, can feel free to contact me anytime.
Sounds very interesting. Any other point, if you have missed, please share. Otherwise, this was my last question.
Yeah, so my last point is that it's very important to learn from history, because many people think that, hey, history to ho gaya, it is all done, what is the point? But history teaches us a lot of important things, because if you see, I can give you one interesting example, that one reason why invaders could penetrate into India, because one reason is that people did not have unity. Like one kingdom which is in Gujarat, or probably another kingdom which is there in UP, they would not have unity among themselves. And what would happen? The person from outside would take advantage of it. And also we had too much of unnecessary feelings of Athini Devo Bhava. Anybody comes, we teach them everything, say them, explain a lot of things and so on. So that kind of trying to be too good also was destructive for Indian civilization. Of course, we have survived through all of that, but we should learn from history. So history teaches us a lot of important lessons. So what I would like to conclude with is that history is probably the best teacher you could ever find. Why? Because your ancestors and the people in the past have lived a life, they have done some mistakes, they have got affected by it, right? And then you are learning from it, and how they reacted and probably how they should have reacted. This is something which we can apply in our lives and make our lives much better than what it was. So history is a great teacher. So in conclusion, I would say that we can learn from history and improve our lives. And history also has amazing spiritual, philosophical aspects as well, especially the Mahabharata and the Gita has amazing things to offer for the betterment of human civilization in general. So with that, that's the last points I have to say.
Thank you, Chandruji. Thank you so much. I think I also got to learn quite a few things, which maybe kind of, I must have missed in my past. But thank you for your time and for sharing this knowledge. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you so much.